911, what's the nature of your emergency?
Your world can change in the blink of an eye.
He walked into the bedroom and you know that she had been murdered.
So he's running up and down, screaming, "Oh my God, someone call 911. There are 2 men killing a girl."
I know my son, and he would not go that long without saying anything to anyone.
Safety can be an illusion and reality a nightmare.
So how do you steal a person, a grown person?
Unspeakable crimes can penetrate any small town, big family, pretty face, or innocent child. And in the wake of a loved one's murder or disappearance, there is nothing more cruel or desperate as silence.
Why won't people talk about it? That's another thing. People don't want to talk about it around here.
For the families of the missing and murdered, they gambled with their sanity as they lose hope in closure and settle for justice. That's where the cold case playing cards come in. In each episode of the Dealing Justice podcast, your hosts Jennifer Dubisak and Lori Jennings will spotlight one card from the cold case playing card deck. Hear the victim's story from the friends and family who knew them best.
Her mom will never stop fighting until she finds out what happens to her daughter.
Learn about the crime and help close the case. Welcome to Season 2. We're not just playing cards, we're dealing justice.
Before we begin this week's episode, I'd like to start with a content warning. This podcast includes foul language and includes discussions of violent crimes. Some topics may be triggering and may include depictions of sexual assault, gore, torture, suicidal ideation, or discussions of mental health. Listener discretion is strongly advised. At around 3 o'clock in the morning, December 29th, 2021, I happened to wake up and open my Facebook and notice that I had a message in my other inbox. I never really checked that inbox, but I went ahead and checked it this time, and I'm so glad I did. In it was a message from Brittany Noojin, who is, as you'll find out, the sister of Breana Noojin-Nix, who we will be discussing today. And she says, quote, "Please feel free to share my sister's story about her mysterious death and how the authorities have mishandled her case and destroyed all the evidence." And then she left me a link. So I took a look, did a little digging, and oh my God, this case is fucking nuts. And before we continue, I also want to let everybody know that Brittany has absolutely been amazing when it came to this case. Like, she gave me all the information, gave me all the accuracies, things like that. And she was just so easy to work with, and she was just a pleasure to work with.
I just want to get her name out there. I want for the whole world to know who Breana is. I feel like if we put enough pressure on them, they'll actually do their job. But nobody knows about Breana. Nobody knows her name. Going back to the autopsy report, I do not see how it's legal for them to have a manner of death on the death certificate, allow the husband to collect the life insurance while it's all still under a criminal investigation. I don't see how that is possible. And if that's the case, then we should be able to have access to that autopsy report. It's not fair to her family that the husband can have access to the autopsy report, but the family can't. That makes no sense to me. And I don't understand why they won't change the death certificate to pending, because it's under a criminal investigation. Why is the insurance company not investigating this? Why do they not want an outside agency investigating this? There's something wrong.
In the afternoon of March 2nd, 2020, Breana Noojin-Nix, a nurse at Princeton Baptist Medical Center in Birmingham, Alabama, was found deceased in her home in Hayden, Alabama by her husband.
The cause of death was determined to have been apparent fentanyl overdose. Yet, so many questions have been raised in the time since her passing, and even before.
If you know anything about nurses, you know that they are considered professionals in the healthcare field. But if she had overdosed, why is it that the injection sites look to have been done by a complete amateur?
Courtney and I will dive into this with several clips of her sister, Brittany Noojin, to help explore this case and hopefully get some answers. A Nefarious Nightmare presents A Vial in Vain the not exactly mysterious death of Breana Noojin-Nix.
My name is Brittany Noojin, and my sister is Breana Noojin-Nix. We're both from Hayden, Alabama. Breana was always very shy. She never really talked much, but she was always very sweet. She was a good girl. She never got in any trouble. She was super smart. She was just all around the best sister that anyone could ask for, and we ended up becoming lifelong best friends, and we were so close in age, so we were always just right there with each other all the time. Breana's friends and family would describe her as very sweet, very caring, loving, just an awesome person. She's very smart, funny, she's hilarious. She was just, beautiful inside and out.
Breana Noojin-Nix was born Breana Noojin May 13, 1987 in Birmingham, Alabama. Her sister, Brittany, when I asked her about this, did say, quote, "I hate even including Nix in her last name." Her sister also recalls Breana as a very shy kid growing up. She says, quote, "I always talked for her because she would never speak. She loved to aggravate me because she was always the older one, but she was so smart and would always keep me out of trouble and protect me if I needed her to. She would also be the one to get me into trouble too. She would put me up to anything and everything."
She is remembered as shy upon first meeting, but once she felt comfortable, she would open up and clown around. She would say the funniest and most random things that would have everyone crying from laughing so hard. Quote, "Breana had never been bullied and was well liked. She was not the most popular girl in school or anything like that, but people did love her and never had anything negative to say about her."
She's also described as someone with a huge heart and a sweet disposition. She never forgot a birthday and loved to show how much her loved ones meant to her through gifts she would give, that she always put so much thought into them. You know how when you have a friend and you know they love a certain band and their favorite color was like purple? Breana would likely send you a gift basket in your favorite color with your favorite scents, your favorite candies, candles, merch from your favorite band, yeah. And she'd likely actually deliver it all to you herself. That's how thoughtful she was. Brittany recalls, quote, "She didn't have much, but she would still give anyone anything if she had it and saw that they were in need."
Brittany said that she always wanted Breana to DJ at events for her because she loved music so much. She also loved movies, and you could count on her to recommend the best Netflix movies. They also used to do crafts together, and Breana would come up with the most adorable things to create. She was very creative. She also was always an ear to listen, and would listen well if you needed to vent or cry, and then give you the most sage advice.
It started March 2nd of 2020 when she passed away, and we're still waiting on justice. It's almost been 2 years. March 2nd will be 2 years for us. So I was at work on March 2nd of 2020, and I had just finished eating lunch, and I received a phone call from her husband, Stephen, around 12:23, and he called me and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I said, "I just finished eating lunch. What are you doing?" And he said, "You need to get over here. Your sister's done tried to kill herself." And he said it just like that. So I really didn't believe him, and I had to ask him if he was joking. And he said, "No, I'm not joking. Why would I joke about something like this? You need to get over here." So I dropped everything that I was doing and rushed to her house. When I did get there, the street was lined with ambulances, police, family members' vehicles. I go inside, and he's sitting in the living room with his parents on both sides of him. And I asked him what happened. He said, I don't know. I was standing outside and I heard a thump, but I just thought that maybe it was her cell phone. So I left to go to the bank and the dump, and I was gone for about an hour. And when I came back, I noticed that there was a light on in the bathroom, but the door was shut. So he tried to open the door, but realized that it was locked. So he told me that he picked the lock with his fingernail and had to shove the door open because her body was laid in front of the door. And he noticed that her feet were blue and she was unresponsive. And so he called 911, and it took right at 2 minutes for the first responders to get there. I wasn't there when it took me about 20-30 minutes to get there after he had called 911. But once I got there, they did work on her for probably a good 30 minutes after I got there. And they gave her 3 rounds of Narcan, but they couldn't save her. As soon as they pronounced her dead, they asked him to write a statement. And he was laughing and joking, saying, "You won't be able to read my handwriting because I went to Hayden." So I told him I would write the statement for him because I wanted to see if what he told me matched up with what the statement said. And in the statement, he said that he was gone for about 30 minutes. He didn't mention going to the bank or the dump. He just left the house, was gone about 30 minutes, came home, found her unresponsive, and then called 911. He had no emotion. Both of his parents were very upset. They both had tears rolling down their faces, and he just sat there and was extremely calm and just stared at the floor the whole time that they worked on her. And then as soon as they pronounced her dead, he was just like any other day, laughing, making jokes.
Breana was a nurse at Princeton Medical Center in the SICU, which is a surgical intensive care unit. I took this excerpt from medschool.ucsd.edu. Quote, "Having a loved one with a critical illness or injuries in the surgical intensive care unit is a stressful and challenging time in your life, in the life of your family. The SICU is an unfamiliar environment where a very large team of specialized staff are caring for your loved one. Very often your loved one is unable to communicate with the healthcare team, and he may be called upon to make important decisions regarding their care." The reason I mentioned that little excerpt is because it sort of defines the kind of personality that you would have to have when working in that kind of environment. So basically I'm saying that she was perfect for her job. In fact, according to Brittany, quote, "Any of her co-workers would say that she was such a great nurse and such a pleasure to be around," end quote.
With this being said, we do urge everyone to remember as this story goes on that Breana was a nurse and thus a professional in the medical field. This will help explain why certain things just do not make any sense.
When we interview family members of the victims, we ask certain questions that would better help describe the person, the incidents, the would-be offenders, and to also help tell the story. One of the questions we asked was if Breana had any known issues to be aware of or any history of drug use. The response from her sister was very clear. Quote, "Never. She cannot even tolerate a pain pill. She rarely drank alcohol and wasn't known to do anything at all." End quote. This is another important factor for everyone to remember going forward.
Breana did have a history of mental illness, which is a very common theme here in the States and should not be stigmatized. Her sister says, quote, "She was seeing a psychiatrist and seemed to have everything under control, but she did tell me a couple of years prior to her death that she felt stuck, and I tried talking her into moving in with me, but she wouldn't do it." End quote. I want to off-topic mention something really quick that I urge listeners to remember. When you're dealing with a history of depression, oftentimes you enter into a relationship with someone who shows signs of narcissistic personality disorder because they tend to start out as someone who will validate you and your feelings. In fact, the efforts of winning someone over is usually so grandiose that it's considered love bombing. I'm not going to go into all the details of a narcissist, but what I will say that this is dangerous, and I urge anyone, especially anyone who has any history of depression, to please absolutely vet anyone you enter into a romantic relationship with, because it can prove to be life-saving. And this isn't to blame anyone at all. This is just a fact. And, not everyone's aware of, narcissism and things like that. And I mean, I'd like to urge the listeners to just please keep this in the back of your head for yourselves.
Definitely. This episode will strike many similarities with our other cases, such as the Landrys, the Watts, Peterson, but we urge everyone to theorize on their own.
Breana caught Stephen cheating on her with this woman 10 years prior to her death. So we don't even know if this woman has ever even been out of the picture. And here she is, just a couple of days after Breana's death, and now she's living in Breana's home, wearing Breana's jewelry. I mean, pretty much just trying to be Breana. I just want to get her name out there. I want for the whole world to know who Breana is. I feel like if we put enough pressure on them, they'll actually do their job. But nobody knows about Breana. Nobody knows her name. Going back to the autopsy report, I do not see how it's legal for them to have a manner of death on the death certificate, allow the husband to collect the life insurance while it's all still under a criminal investigation. I don't see how that is possible. And if that's the case, then we should be able to have access to that autopsy report. It's not fair to her family that the husband can have access to the autopsy report, but the family can't. That makes no sense to me. And I don't understand why they won't change the death certificate to pending, because it's under a criminal investigation. Why is the insurance company not investigating this? Why did they not want an outside agency investigating this? There's something wrong.
Hi, I'm Renee Swanson, host of the Covert Narcissism podcast. Narcissism is a very common word in today's world. Narcissists are the arrogant, self-centered, loud life of the party who only talk about themselves, bragging and over-exaggerating their achievements. Covert narcissists are not like this. They hide their narcissism to an insane level. Not only does the world not see it, but the victim does not see it. Even the covert narcissist can convince themselves that they are caring and compassionate people. They carry the same traits of arrogance, superiority, entitlement, hypersensitivity, but they hide this behind a facade of humbleness, quietness, compassion, and even insecurity. Learn to see through their mask, their games, their manipulations. Learn to protect yourself from their abuse. Join me and thousands of others today through the Covert Narcissism podcast. You can find my podcast anywhere that you consume the podcasts that you enjoy. You can also join us in our closed Facebook group, Covert Narcissism Group. I wish you much peace on your journey of healing.
This is Histories and Mysteries. I'm Ashley.
I'm Jessica.
And I'm Rochelle.
And on our podcast, we talk about fascinating history like the history of witches and Bonnie and Clyde.
True crime stories like John Wayne Gacy and the Slender Man stabbings.
Creepy paranormal like the Black-Eyed Kids possession and the history of tarot cards.
We also often mispronounce words and mess up common sayings like bang for your buck.
And struggle with the word buried.
Buried, actually.
So if you want to laugh with us or at us, we don't mind. Check out Histories and Mysteries.
Found on all major podcast platforms.
And social media.
historiesandmysteries.ca.
Breana Noojin met Steve Nix at a lake house get-together in 2008. He made sure everyone knew that he was the only one to ever show her any attention. And they married November 5th, 2011. The marriage wasn't exactly perfect. In fact, Stephen had cheated on Breana in 2010, a year before their marriage. And after Breana was found deceased, Stephen had been seen with some other woman he had an affair with. I took a little peek at his social media accounts and it appears, keyword appears, that he misses his wife and is heartbroken in some places. But the way he acted when she was discovered and also after the fact tells a whole different story.
Brittany recalls several red flags about Stephen Nix. He was described as very annoying, never shut up, especially when he was the topic, and also hard to be around for long periods of time. She also said that he never said one good thing about Breana. He would put her down, talk to her in front of the whole family, all of her friends. Sounds like a narcissist. He only likes to talk about women and partying, loved talking about himself, and is described as a braggart. She said that he has no true friends, so he wasn't known for keeping a relationship or friendship for very long. She even said, quote, "Even before all of this public stuff, nobody liked him ever. None of my family has ever liked him. We just tolerated him because we loved Breana so much. He didn't even talk good about his own sister. The last conversation that I'd had with him about his sister, he said that he hated her boyfriend and that she was a whore."
Wow. That's harsh.
Fuck yeah,
Definitely
it is.
red flags everywhere, dude.
No shit. So, I've been reading up a lot about narcissism lately, especially covert narcissism, and but narcissism in general for the past year or so. Every bit of this hits each trait of narcissistic personality disorder. It's important to remember, not all narcissists are murderers, but all murderers show the 9 key traits of NPD, according to an article from Einstein Shrugged, which, I'm going to include in the show notes.
When we asked Brittany about any theories she personally had, she said, quote, "I think she was getting ready to leave him, and since he didn't work, he wouldn't have any income without her. She was worth more dead to him, and he knew that he was the first beneficiary on her life insurance. I also think that he had this planned out for a while. He talked her into filing bankruptcy in 2019, and he was known to have affairs throughout their marriage, and leading up to her death. He even had one female that is not the one living with him now, posting pictures of him and her together on social media while Breana was alive," end quote.
Interesting to note that according to Brittany, and speaking of his sister, Breana also died on his sister's birthday, after his sister told someone that she had a feeling that something bad was going to happen that day. Evidently, she's helping him remove evidence from a crime scene. Brittany goes on to say, quote, "Without a doubt in my mind, I think he had this planned out for a while," end quote.
Breana was found by her husband March 2nd, 2020 in Hayden, Alabama, just 2 months shy of her 33rd birthday. Stephen made a call saying he had found her, and when her family arrived, Stephen's parents were already there, and Stephen acted very unusual. A heads up that some of the things that Brittany will unveil will infuriate you, and may also raise so many questions about the integrity of Stephen Nix's character.
2 days after Breana passed away, her husband found 2 empty vials of fentanyl in her spare bedroom drawer. I don't understand how or why she would have left 2 empty fentanyl vials in her drawer if she was an addict and had this secret addiction that she didn't want anyone to know about, because she was extremely smart. Even if she were trying to hide a secret addiction, she would have known better than to leave 2 empty vials of fentanyl laying out. And we know that the vials did not come from her hospital, because we have asked several of the employees that worked there. I've sent them all pictures of the vials that Stephen found, and not one person recognizes those vials. The DA is telling us that the vials did trace back to Princeton, the hospital that Breana worked at, but she cannot prove that. She will not show us any proof of that. She just tells us that we have to trust what she's telling us. But according to anybody that works at Princeton that has handled fentanyl there, not one person recognizes those vials at all. The husband's uncle was actually there at the scene, working the scene in uniform. He is a deputy at the Blount County Sheriff's Office, and I feel like it should be considered a conflict of interest that he was even there, allowing the family members in the house. The original investigator was more intimidated by him than she was able to do her job, so she wouldn't even question Stephen or interrogate him. She did catch him in several lies, but she didn't do anything about it because his uncle was just standing over her the whole time, and then Stephen had both of his parents on each side of him. And almost as if they were kind of helping him answer questions, and the family members were there before the first responders even got there. His parents live 10 minutes away, and the EMT station is about 30 seconds from Breana and Stephen's house. It took them 2 minutes to get there, but his parents and his uncle was already there before the first responders got there. Later on, we found out that the uncle was working as a guard at the dam that day, and that's why they explained why he was in uniform. But the dam is a good 30 minutes from Stephen's house. So that means he had to have called his uncle, waited 30 minutes for him to get there, and then called 911.
With all of this, I beg the question, listeners, what do you think happened to Breana Noojin? Isn't it a little odd that a healthcare professional seemingly overdosed on fentanyl and that it's assumed it was self-inflicted, yet the puncture wounds and bruising all suggest an amateur? Isn't it a little bizarre that a healthcare professional, who knows what she's doing, by the way, knows the absolute danger of fentanyl and that a minuscule dose can kill, but she's somehow taken way too much to cause an overkill? Maybe it's a bit of a reach, but isn't it a little odd that a husband who has no income and a history of treating his wife like absolute trash is suddenly stricken with grief over his wife's passing? Except he only appears stricken with grief when appropriate. Remember, he was laughing and acting very laid back at her funeral. He even went on a little mancation right after she died. Kinda weird to me. Yeah, deduce what you will, but I know I have my own theory, and it's that Breana was murdered.
We asked Brittany if she had any relevant information to state, and this is what she said, quote, "We try to make sure that everything is accurate before it is shared on social media. We do understand that podcasts are time-consuming and try not to be so picky with every little thing. But we do not want any false information being spread, and we try to make sure that anything shared by us is accurate. But so far, pretty much everything that I know about is extremely close. We may have originally said that the needle was found next to her on an earlier assumption, but we did get confirmation from the DA that the needle was found in the sink. I'm pretty sure there may be a couple of errors in the story told by others, but nothing that would be significant. I'm speaking with one of the news stations right now, and they are getting ready to cover the story." End quote.
I asked Brittany this morning if there was anything else that she would like for us to add to this episode, and she did say that they finally got the patient care report from the paramedics, and then shared these tweets with me from user S. Fisher on Twitter, and he goes on to say, quote, "The EMS response report in the case of Breana Noojin-Nix has finally been obtained since probate was successfully opened. The story her husband provided seems to be coming apart. Is DA Pamela Casey looking into these inconsistencies? Is the sheriff's office? 1 + 1 = 16 in this case."
He then goes on to say, quote, "As evidenced by the timestamps, the very first thing the husband of Breana Noojin-Nix tells 911 is that it's a suicide. Before he, quote unquote, finds the needle in the sink, before he knows it's an overdose, he's saying she's unresponsive in the bathtub, but knows it's a suicide? How so certain?" He raises some very valid points in his tweets, so since Brittany shared those with us, we will link his Twitter handle in the show notes.
Before we conclude today's episode, I want to go ahead and read some tweets found on some of the Twitter accounts that I've been kind of following regarding this case. We mentioned Stephen Fisher earlier, and I'm going to go ahead and just continue on with what else he's had to say, because he raises some really interesting questions and, even some theories. He says, and I'm just going to go into order with what I've seen, but he says, he would then out loud ask if life insurance still paid if it was a suicide, after finding out that it would not. Suicide is never mentioned again. Just that she had a secret drug problem and it was an accidental overdose. And I'm like, yeah, that's crazy. Another one that he says is, Breana Noojin-Nix's husband claims he arrived home and discovered Breana unresponsive. He calls 911 and remains on the phone with them, even directing first responders to the bathroom. Yet the lead investigator notes his parents and uncle, who is the sheriff, are already on scene when first responders arrive. So exactly when does Stephen call his parents? Must have been before 911. Sure hope DA Pamela Casey and the sheriff's office have subpoenaed the parents' phone records. And even if by some 1 in a million chance all of these people happen to stop by, just as Stephen is arriving home and happen to quote-unquote just be there, how come nobody is doing CPR on Breana? There is a trained sheriff deputy there and nobody's doing CPR? Fucking great question. And then he goes on to say, I think virtually every law enforcement agency now carries Narcan. As soon as EMTs arrived, they administered 3 doses of Narcan, but she was asystole from the time they connected her to a monitor and never had any sign of life. But there is no mention of anyone giving Narcan besides the EMTs. Interesting. He then goes on to say, someone asked him if his uncle was the sheriff, and he goes on to say a sheriff's deputy with the same sheriff's department handling the investigation. And then here's one from Brittany. Well, here's quite a few from Brittany. She goes on to say, if fentanyl goes missing from a hospital and ends up in someone's bedroom drawer, shouldn't the DEA get involved? Quote, that's not my job to get them involved. That's up to the hospital. End quote. And that comes from Pamela Casey, who is the DA of Blount County, Alabama. Brittany goes on to say, do we have enough to subpoena the husband's phone records? Quote, I have the power to subpoena your phone records if I wanted to. End quote, from Pamela Casey. Again, Brittany also posts this picture that says, quote, I absolutely cannot stand a liar. If you lie about a child, you're an evil human. Your lies will catch up to you. And she quotes it by saying, whose child, Pamela? You're not protecting any children that I know of except for your own. Interesting, isn't it? Brittany also posted something showing a text. Quote, this text was sent to Stephen on 3/2/21, which, by the way, to our listeners, is a year after Breana was found. Instead of responding, he got his mom to make a post and tagged Breana Noojin-Nix in it on the 1-year anniversary of her death. Her post is in the comments. It looked to be the family dragging the Noojin's name pretty much through the mud, and I'll save all of that for you all and let you all follow the Twitter and see all the images. Maybe I'll even post some of the images in the Instagram show notes when we get those, but it is a little weird that this family is super defensive towards the Noojins. Defensiveness usually suggests that you're hiding something. I will die on that hill. Brittany goes on to say, though, quote, not only is law enforcement not helping, the Nix family has to publicly post this for everyone to bash Breana's family. We had no say in the headstone because Stephen owns the plot. One more thing to mention. Another tweet from Brittany says, quote, after keeping quiet for a whole year just to find out that nothing had been done, we decided to ask the public for help in finding out what happened to Bree. The uncle's wife had us blocked for months. After we made the post, she changes her profile picture and unblocks us. The profile picture says, for reference, by the way, quote, I will put you in a trunk and help people look for you, end quote. Now, usually that's kind of a funny little thing that people share through Facebook, social media, whatever. But in this case, it is super sus. Brittany then goes on to say that she has now deactivated her account, she being the person that posted that picture. I just want to make one little quick statement here. What is hidden in the dark will be shown by the light. I think that's how the quote goes. Brittany is seriously fighting for justice for her sister, and I absolutely commend her on a job well done. She says that nobody knows Breana's name, and I'm absolutely positive that if they don't already, they will soon. This is yet another case of injustice towards a family who just wants answers. And also, this is clearly something Chris Watts-esque or Brian Laundrie-esque or, I don't know, Scott Peterson-esque. What do you all think? Do y'all believe that Stephen Nix is culpable? I mean, I'm not pointing any fingers here, but he does have a TikTok account, and he has a video of him going, on a little man vacation with a bonfire very shortly after Breana's death. A little weird. Perhaps he's just really upset by this, that he needs to practice self-care with a mancation. I don't know. Did y'all detect the snark in my voice? I'll leave that all up for you to decide, but all I'm saying is whoever killed Breana Noojin needs to own up to it like a man take accountability, and do his time. And that is all I've got to say about all that. With that, if you have any information regarding this case, please reach out to the Birmingham Police Department's anonymous tip line at 205-282-0470, or if you are more comfortable, on their website at police.birminghamal.gov/bureaus/investigations. Of course, we're going to include that in the show notes. We'll include all relevant sources and links in the show notes, but I do encourage everyone to share this episode, sign the petition, donate to the GoFundMe, talk to your newspapers, news stations, creators, and let's get this story to blow up. Breana and her family deserve justice and closure for once.
Absolutely.
So do you have an ending quote, Amanda? Of course you do. You've got to.
Oh, my quote's good this week. How many narcissists does it take to screw in a light bulb?
I'm sure that they're all taking credit for it.
None. They don't use light bulbs. They use gaslighting.
Oh, damn. I'm gonna guess that this is by Howard Stern.
Oh, so close. It's actually anonymous.
Oh, wow. That's
anonymous.
Okay,
whoever
well,
that is.
Guys, make sure you join our Patreon. Make sure that you, we have some good content on Patreon.
You guys can see us banter back and forth with each other and just tell jokes.
We actually banter in Patreon. We don't banter on here anymore, except for at the end. Before we get off of here, I want to go ahead and thank Kimberly Chaffee for joining our Patreon. We now have 2 Patreon members, so welcome and we love you. Also, let me go ahead and get into some reviews real quick. The first one comes from Autumn Groob, who actually runs the podcast called Autumn's Oddities, and it's fucking badass, and everybody should check it out. She says, 5 stars. Great show. So glad I found this show. Great chemistry and banter, plus fascinating topics. Thank you so much, Autumn. The next one comes from DG Nicole, who runs another podcast called Doom Generation, and if you are an 80s or 90s kid like I am, you will love this podcast, especially because they talk about Heathers, which is my favorite movie in the world. But she says, 5 stars. The horrible with a dash of humor. A great balance of 2 ladies who truly care about those affected by these crimes, but can use their humor to push through it and drag the perpetrators. Good dynamic between the hosts, not a lot of filler. Enjoyed and will definitely be back for more. Thank you so much. Real quick, be sure to check out, we have a bonus takeover episode coming this week, right? It's coming from the Jury Room. It's Kevin Cook from Jury Room. It's a phenomenal podcast, by the way. More serious in tone, very ethical. I actually had to leave him a good review. I look forward to working with him more in the future, but he discusses John Wayne Gacy. So y'all have to check that out. It's coming up. So you're going to get some extra content. Yay.
Yay.
But yeah, so there's that. If you're going to be a podcaster, if you're a major podcaster, don't rip off smaller podcasters. Not even joking. And don't be a dick. Don't be a dick.
And wear deodorant.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to A Nefarious Nightmare. All research done for this podcast, depending on the episode, is written by Amanda Cronin and Courtney Fenner. Scripting, editing, mastering, and sound design are done by Courtney Fenner. If you would like to visit our links, merch store, or social media, please either go to www.anefariousnightmare.com or to our linktree. That's linktr.ee/A Nefarious Nightmare Podcast. Music used for our intro and exit is by Ghost Stories Incorporated. You may find their music at bandcamp.com. Additional backing music for today's episode was provided by Epidemic Sound. Please consider leaving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts to help us expand our audience. Thank you very much for listening, and take care.